Good, everybody. Sorry. And welcome to our Tuesday afternoon roundtable discussion. We're going to, our panel of experts, not me, we'll be talking about utopia, dystopia, and the utopian dream then and now. It's going to be chaired by Professor Gregory Clays, who, if you were here earlier, was our highlight speaker earlier. He's an emeritus professor of the history of at Royal Holloway, University of London, and I will now pass on to Gregory to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Utopian Dream Then and Now, amazingly broad title, which could invite any number of different interventions. Because time is sort of the essence today, I'm going to allow the speakers to go in alphabetical order and ask them if they could just introduce themselves in one sentence and then speak to whatever aspect of this grand theme they please. And we should have, as we're finishing at 17:45, if each speaker holds to between 6 and 7 minutes, then we should have about a quarter of an hour or so for discussion at the end, of course, which will be nice. So Claire, would you like to start?
Absolutely. Good morning from New Harmony, Indiana. I am the Interim Assistant Director at Historic New Harmony. And as you probably heard from Mr. Rinsma earlier today, we are the site of two utopian attempts, the first by the Harmonists, and then of course the second led by Robert Owens, who we are all here celebrating today. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of our community today and how we try to emulate that utopian legacy as far as that then and now aspect of this discussion. I'm not sure, I missed unfortunately some of Mr. Rinsma's presentation, so I'm not sure how far he went into it, but we are still a thriving community. About 750 people. We're located on the Wabash River on the western corner of the state of Indiana. And when you hear 750 people, you think, oh, small town, small village, not a lot going on here. But I believe we kind of go with that utopian legacy in the organizations we have here and the population we have here, and in kind of how we thrive as a tourist destination for our history. So we have Historic New Harmony, and we are a unified program with the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites and a part of the University of Southern Indiana. So that's where we get a lot of that educational aspect. We work a lot with USI professors, students, etc. We have the Working Men's Institute, which I'm sure you heard of earlier from Mr. Rinsma. And then we have so many community organizations that work to help our town, including the Robert Lee Blaffer Foundation, the Kiwanis Club, our Ministerial Association, etc. So I believe kind of in that aspect, we work to kind of emulate those utopian values that we've had previously. Now, of course, the one part of Mr. Rinsma's presentation I did see is kind of those questions we get a lot about was this a socialist community? Was this a communist community? And of course, he explained the answer to all of that. But that's something that I think goes to that dystopia aspect. So that's something that we work to really kind of disprove as far as how we educate our wonderful utopian history here. And I encourage you, of course, if you are able to come visit us in New Harmony. And I'll, of course, pass it on to the next speaker.
Great, thank you very much. That was admirably brief. Doug, would you like to go next?
But am I the next person in the alphabet? But
you are.
I am.
By my reckoning.
First nerd. I'm Doug Major. I'm an optometrist in beautiful Central Coast, California. Independent historian, and enjoy thinking about because this is a hotbed in San Luis Obispo of communal efforts, including the Temple of the People and other things, as well as the mission. So have a short connection. You know, I love the connectiveness of history, and so I like the work of John Burke, and so I'm going to follow his example and quickly try to connect some dots today to an endpoint that I hope that you'll appreciate. And the dots will be between David Dale, Robert Owens, Thomas and Alexander Campbell, the Owenites, the Campbellites, and then that would lead to the success of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormonites, through an intermediary, an Ohio communist, Isaac Morley. Of course, David Dale is often overlooked against his more press-savvy son-in-law, Robert, but his work obviously originated the successes of New Lanark, and his Daleite ideas and actually religious ideas were a big contribution to the Intellectual Society of Glasgow at the time, right when Thomas and Alexander Campbell were at the university there in the late 1870s and 1800s. So in 1809, Thomas Campbell spread his declaration of and address to the Christian Association through the middle United States. Robert Owen, of course, spread his message of a new view of society in 1813 to every village in Britain, as well as the capitals. And of course, that culminated in a joint session of Congress in 1825 with 3 presidents present. And this is going to collide in 1829 when Owens and Campbell are going to collide in Cincinnati for their great 5-day debate. Now that's in close proximity to a little hamlet called Kirtland, Ohio, where a cooper and a flautist for the War of 1812, Isaac Morley, was beginning his own communal project. Under the influence of a recent defector of Campbell, Sidney Rigdon, and a desire to return to primitive Christianity as a result of the second chapter in Acts, the Morley communal family of about 70 plus included many Owenites who had come from the Kendall community that was recently disbanded. Also in Ohio, in Cincinnati, Josiah Warren had his Cincinnati Time store, and there was also a large Shaker community that added to this communal melting pot in Upper Ohio. In the fall of 1830, entered P.P. Pratt, a friend of Rigdon and a new Mormonite who talks about the restoration of a primitive church in upstate New York. Morley first, and then his whole family, communal family, joins this new movement, doubles the membership. Rigdon travels to New York to meet the young prophet Joseph Smith. At the time, Smith was in the process of translating a part of Genesis where Enoch creates a perfect city of God, a Zion society. He finds out about Morley's communal efforts in Ohio and canonizes that concept of Zion, a place where there'd be no poor, and that again becomes a part of Latter-day Saints culture. Pratt and others go on to find the location of this new Jerusalem for this Zion side to be set up in the far reaches of the western United States, in Independence, Missouri. Morley is among that first group to go out there and try to attempt this community, and it was planned to start there and proceed all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Because of their printing press, their Yankee attitudes towards slavery in this slave state, they were soon drove from Independence, or Morley and the group, then far west, and then Morley being mobbed and in prison, loses all his possessions and flees with the other religious refugees into Illinois, a non-slave state, and establishes the first Mormon community in Hancock County. His small communal town thrives, and just north of him, a larger, more successful Nauvoo is formed, township, with the help of converts from Britain who are now streaming up the Mississippi River. This large number of immigrants caused alarm to the other along the riverbank, and of course, eventually leading to the martyrdom, the killing of Smith, and they burned Morley Town, the only town there that was destroyed, to the ground. So he and the rest of the saints head west the valley of the Great Salt Lake. Earlier in the travels of Brigham Young and others, go to Britain and find wild success among the working class of Middle England. This added a religious dimension to the prevalent communal ideas espoused by Owens and others. In the late 1840s and 50s, 80,000 joined the Mormon movement in Britain, and over 50,000 joined as English Zionists go across the location called Deseret Territory. Young's meaning of Deseret is honeybee, possibly adapting Owens' symbol of a bee skep into the Latter-day Saint culture and placing it on the Utah state flag. So I thought this was an interesting Victorian first-person account by Charles Dickens, and in his opinion of an uncommercialized traveler. in a piece called Bound for the Great Salt Lake. So this is Dickens in his own word. I, unpersonalized traveler, in the firm of human interest brothers, had come aboard this immigrant ship, Amazon, to see what about 800 Latter-day Saints were like. Now I describe them with scrupulous exactness. Uncommercial. These are a fine set of people you have brought together here. Mormon agent. Yes, sir, they are a fine set of people. Uncommercial. Looking about. Indeed, I think it would be difficult to find 800 people together anywhere else and find so much beauty, so much strength, and capacity for work among them. An agent, I think so. We sent about 1,000 more yesterday from Liverpool. Afterward, I learned from the dispatch that was sent home by the captain before he struck out, highly extolling the behavior of these immigrants and that perfect order and propriety of all their social arrangements. And he said this, I went aboard their ship to bear testimony against them if they deserved it. And I fully believed I would. To my great astonishment, they did not deserve it. And all my predispositions and tendencies must not be affected as an honest witness. I went over the Amazon side feeling it impossible to deny that as far as this remarkable influence had produced, that some remarkable influence had produced a remarkable result, which better known influences I'd always missed. Sort of a connection with me. My great-great-grandmother was on the Amazon. So back in Salt Lake, Morley is singled out a Ute tribe leader, he's 63 at the time, Wakara, and asked the man to establish a community among the natives. So Morley with a select group goes deep into Indian territory into a high mountain valley called San Pete and names and attempts one last communal city, Manti. He and the natives get mixed results there. He is now buried there under the shadow of a gigantic communal building project called the Manti Temple. This valley, by the way, has fostered the longest running turkey production cooperative in the United States. And with that and other experiments, Brigham Young, 27 orders of Enoch in the 1870s. This is sort of the communal idea and the cooperative idea that has spread in this area. And just so you're aware, Utah now has the state with least inequality as calculated by the Gini Index. So Robert Owens' work is still at work, maybe not fully recognized in the Great Basin. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Umberto, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Klaas. Well,
Thanks very much, Liana. Richard, you're up next.
Thank you for inviting me into this panel. So my name is Richard Winsma. I teach at the University of Caen in Normandy, France. I was born in the Netherlands, have been living in France for quite a few years now. And my love every now and then is to go to New Harmony, Indiana, to visit the site of this utopian commune founded by Robert Owen in 1825, and do research, go through the archives in the Working Men's Institute. The archives of the Working Men's Institute are not the only archive about Robert Owen. Of course, we have more of that in Scotland, in England, also in France, in the Netherlands, in the United States of America. There are many archives that still have traces of that community. And I do not want to talk about how utopia can be interpreted in all these manifold ways if we take into account all those philosophers of the 19th and 20th century, or even before that. It is very difficult this is, I think, is a trap to try to mirror all the ideas of the 19th and 20th century on Robert Owen in 1825. We cannot do that. I mean, this is a man of his age. He didn't know about Marx, he didn't know about Engels, but he did know about utopia. So I think that the interesting thing about utopia is to see it in Owen's view. What does utopia according to Robert Owen. And what is dystopia? A word that doesn't exist at the time, of course. Well, for me, dystopia is when utopia goes wrong. Let's keep it simple. Utopia starts for me with Thomas More. Thomas More, who simply imagines this society that is so very, very different from what is happening in his age under Henry VIII. And he becomes an inspiration, simply dreaming. So for me, utopia, and that is also, I think, what Robert Owen did when he thinks about utopia, is to dream about the future. Simply dreaming about the future and see how we can imagine a society that is different from everyday life, that is better from everyday life. And if we keep things simple like that, it doesn't really matter if you are rich or poor, or if you're wealthy, upper class, or a worker, lower class. We all have dreams. And the force and the strength of Robert Owen, and that is something that Marx and Engels weren't able to do, or at least their followers. The force of Robert Owen was to put that dream into the minds of both the rich and the poor, of both the leaders and the working class people. And doing that, he was able to combine those forces, for example, by inviting his partner, William McClure, who was a very rich man, but who was also very much into this dream of giving a good education to children who could not afford an education. Not because he wanted just to educate the children, but because he hoped. His creed was, ignorance is the devil and the mother of all mischief. So he really hoped that by giving a good education to anyone, most of all those children who didn't have a chance to get that education, his hope was to improve the future lives of those children, giving them the means and the tools through education of not maybe changing the world today through revolution, but by instructing the youth, hoping for a better future, knowing that this instruction would lead to better decisions in the future. And in my opinion, New Harmony is all about that. It's not about the opposition between systems. It's not about this democracy working better because it is the free market system, that democracy working less better because it's a socialistic system, or the other way around. It's about the hope of a better future and how to accomplish that. And Owen didn't believe himself, I think, that he had all the tools. But what I think was courageous is that at least he tried. He tried without hindsight we have today. I mean, it's easy for us in the 20th and 21st century to comment upon his efforts. I mean, it is easy for Marx and Engels to call him a utopian and just a dreamer. But I mean, before Owen, there weren't that many people, were they, who were, I mean, well, of course, we have philosophers like Hume and Locke and people trying to analyze the system, society, how things work in England. But if we compare those societies, if we look at the society in which Robert Owen grew up, and if we look at the legacy his sons were able to leave, to provide to the United States of America, even if few people talk about it, but I hope I was able to show that in my video, there are major changes. And sometimes we can't see those changes arrive immediately, but in the end, people like Josiah Warren, or maybe other great thinkers much later in history, do feel an inspiration and an example, not by judging, not by saying this is right, that is wrong, but simply by attaching themselves to the dream of utopia. Yes, we can do better. And it is true that nowadays people will tell you that they don't like utopia because it will always become dystopia at some point. But the limit between the one or the other, I mean, from utopia to dystopia, it's just a step. It's a very small step. A small government, for example, which is kind of what the United States likes to do, can lead to a very big importance of the market system. Too important, maybe. Giants, Google, Amazon. On the other hand, too much government can lead to situations we see in Russia and Ukraine today, for example. So where is this middle line? Where is this balance? And Owen didn't have the answer to that question either, but at least he tried. Attaching himself to the dream, we must make a better future. Man can make his own existence. That was the creed of the Education Society of New Harmony. That was the creed of New Harmony. Man can make his own existence through educations. And as a teacher, because of course I'm also a teacher, I think it is unbelievable that wherever I look, if it's in France, if it's in the United States of America, even if it's in England or other parts of the Western world, the educational budget is the one suffering the most right now. It's incredible. In the United States, they can't find teachers anymore. What happened to the United States of America that there are no teachers anymore? What happened to France that we can't find teachers anymore? Well, I could give you the answer, of course. But it shows that somehow in the 21st century, education is not that important anymore. Governments don't feel it is that important. What people feel is important is communication, make-believe. But at the same time, we are losing the dream. And Robert Owen reminds us of that dream. And I will keep it with that.
Right, thanks so much, Fitzer. We've got about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more, for general discussion. We've had a very wide-ranging set of perspectives from our presenters today on just what these grand themes mean for us today. Tony, do we have a general audience who want to put questions in the chat or personally? Is Tony there? You are there. Okay, so do we have people who are able to enter questions into the chat, or do you want to relay questions to any of the speakers from them?
Hello, Professor Claes. I'm here with the Ruby mic if anybody in the room would like to ask a question or contribute to the discussion. Would anybody like to ask a question here? Don't think we've got any takers here in the room. Is
Don't be shy.
No.
It's a big subject and somewhat
I think that's
intimidating.
the thing, yeah, it's a wee bit daunting.
But it is pressing, it is vibrant, and it is, as several speakers have pointed out, extraordinarily relevant. So, I mean, maybe I can just pick up one. Yeah, was there a question? No, okay. So maybe I can pick up just one aspect of the debate that several of the speakers have touched on. It's commonplace in the scholarly literature and popular discourse about utopianism that utopia, not inevitably and always, although some maintain that, but all too often does bring about dystopia, that failed attempts to create the so-called perfect society, which utopia doesn't, by the way, attempt to do, as everybody knows, is ever read Moore's Utopia, where there is still crime, there is still divorce and so on. But that attempts to implement a much better society, particularly in the degree to which they aim at perfection, tend to go wrong on a colossal scale. So I thought I'd just make a comment about the reverse arrangement, when dystopias have the potential to create much more utopian sensibilities, consciousness, and possibly social arrangements. Take two examples that are very familiar to all of us: the corona pandemic of the last 2 years and the events of the last 5 days. Just to take the latter, if, as I imagine all of you have done, you've been following the news hour by hour over these very tense, emotionally fraught days, you will have noticed a colossal change in European consciousness about the rectitude of defending democracy. Not merely is it the case that we have Sweden and Finland wanting to join NATO, Not merely is it the case that we have Germany reversing the main platforms of its post-war foreign policy in its willingness to arm a country at war with another country, to shift from a defensive essentially to an offensive posture. Not merely do we have the fact that the European Union is, as we talk, contemplating Ukraine's application for membership in the European Union. And then to sort of crown it off, all of these things come together in the consciousness, I'm sorry to say, the United Kingdom to one side, that the European Union is, to go back to a comment that one speaker made, a colossal peace project, that it functions, not perfectly by any means, that it has plenty of critics, although utopia may not exist, but nonetheless, the realization is that this vehicle has helped to prevent war over the better part of the last 80 years, since the end of the Second World War. And that today its function within Europe is now more utopian in the common sense, common language use of that word, than it has been in a very, very long time. What repercussions this will have in the United Kingdom, I wouldn't care to speculate, but of course, I have my own views on this. But I think this shows us that out of dystopia, out of the consciousness, that we can make such severe mistakes that if we don't come together collectively to remedy where we've gone wrong, and of course it could well be that Mr. Putin is the ultimate victim of the Ukraine conflict. That's at least what would be one of the most utopian outcomes to come out of this conflict. But this shows us at least that out of, so to speak, the conflagration of dystopia, a utopian phoenix might well yet arise. I leave aside, obviously, the main question that I addressed earlier today about the catastrophe in the environment that will overwhelm all of these other questions, including the present conflict in the Ukraine. But even there too, of course, humanity may well, it has to, rise to the challenge and create precisely that very much better society about which a number of us have spoken. So anyone else want to add something to this?
Well, I could maybe add that one of the fundamental ideas that Robert Owen brought forward was, of course, this idea of working together in cooperative systems. And you can try to project that on the European Union, or you can even project that on other things that are going on right now. Different philosophies on how international trade should work, but the fundamental idea of putting equality in the middle of an economic system and not just profit might be something to work with in order to improve the way we deal with climate, we deal with each other. So in this modern, Robert Owen's views are still very, very modern. Nobody wants to be limited in his freedom and space and interests, but the idea of a cooperative where everybody looks at the other to see, hey, wait a minute, what I am doing now, is it detrimental to the other? Is it beneficial for everyone? I think that is a fundamental way of viewing the world, that if people follow up on this idea and look around them and do exactly that, that is to say, when people take decisions, not just thinking, how does it serve myself, but how does it serve the others? Well, that would be quite an interesting method to On the other hand, we still have our past ghosts. We still have these societies that don't function like we do, with dictators and despots, or with money being the only value really interesting. So how do you cope with that? I mean, it is good to have dreams, but if others don't follow your dreams, then how do you solve that issue? And I think that problem cannot be solved, not by myself or anyone on this panel, but it is something we need to think about all together. And their education is the key, I think. If we teach our children that we have to live together on this one planet, and no, there is no outer space, there is no moon, there is no planet Mars where we can simply fly to. If things go wrong here, we need to solve our problems now on this planet. We don't have two planets. So there I say, yes, the cooperative idea of Robert Owen is still very relevant, taking care of each other.
I had a comment to make as far as your point about education. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this, but New Harmony actually no longer has a school. Our school closed in 2012. And I think that as Mr. Rinsma commented, education is such an important part of that utopian dream of having those ideas, of having that dream of wanting to be better. And I think that's something that has definitely contributed to our community. We have tried to step in, of course, the Working Men's Institute has stepped in, and we work to have those educational programs, not just on our history, but others as well, other history, other topics, etc. And I think working together, so to speak, in our community to kind of fill that educational void has brought our community closer together as far as ensuring that education is continued throughout our community, and for not only our children as far as our younger population, but for our entire population.
Okay, sad to hear that you lost your school.
Yeah. Could I make a comment also?
Yeah, but yeah, this will have to be the last one if we're keeping to time, but do go ahead.
Last, but I just on a personal note, right? So, thank you much for your comments. I think the thing that Robert Owens personally does to me is the empowerment idea that we can do that as individuals in our little piece of the puzzle. I'm an eye doctor, and I was inherited, so every child in our county gets a eye exam at site. California doesn't have that. And we just had a change in policy that's going to wipe out our program. So it's surprising to me some bald old guy thinks like he can take on Sacramento and a $130 billion group, and it's working. So I would suggest that the power of Owens and the other great leaders and you personally, each of you personally, that makes me feel like, instead of thinking about it, you start putting a brick on brick, right? I would suggest that that's the power of the message, is the how a young person can use technology of his day and he was the Bill Gates, right, of the textile industry, and yet had the idea that instead of just enjoying his wealth, that he would extend it out to everyone. That, to me, that's the personal power, and I appreciate your sharing your remarks, and that's the empowerment. I think we all should just feel empowered that let's take care of our little piece of the slice of the pie, and because the world is a better place. Thank you.
Yes, one man can make a difference. You're so right. One man can make a difference, and you don't know who it is going to be, but stick to the dream, and one man can make the difference. If we try it all, it's even better.
Thank you so much. That seems to be a very happy note on which to conclude. Thank you to all the contributors, and to those of you out there whom we can't see, also for listening in, and do enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.